One of my favorite games publishers in the modern era has definitely been .emu. The developers under their umbrella have been responsible for some modern classics. Absolute bangers, you hear me? It was Guardcross Games and Lizard Cube who brought this publisher to my attention when they released Streets of Rage 4, and I personally can't wait to see what Lizard Cube does with that Shinobi reboot. Glad to see that Sega actually put another beloved IP in these guys' hands. Tribute Games themselves cooked up a fine meal when they dropped TMNT Shredder's Revenge last year, which is still beginning DLC drops to this day. Love to see it. I actually reviewed those two specific games myself, and through osmosis, there's plenty of other games they've dropped that I understand to be good. However, in regards to new games they were dropping this year, I was really looking forward to Metal Slug Tactics. Metal Slug is a legacy series from SNK that I've pretty much always known about but haven't ever played before. As a kid, me and my brother played a ton of games in the vein of Contra growing up, especially Contra 3 on the SNES, so I've always had an appreciation for those arcadey run-and-gun games. I also loved Gunstar Heroes on the Sega Genesis, but Metal Slug was always something I caught in passing. No one I knew had these games when I was coming up, not even Justin with his magic bowling ball bag, and I would catch it randomly anytime I was anywhere that had arcade cabinets, you know? So I always had it in the back of my mind. That said, I found myself greatly interested when Metal Slug Tactics got announced. Take a beloved classic run-and-gun series and turn it into one of my favorite genres of RPGs? I'm all for it. And I actually want to review more games in that genre in the future because that triangle strategy review is starting to look pretty lonely by itself in my catalog. Antelopes is on the soundtrack. You know I love me some of that, but I'm digressing. MST was put in the hands of a relatively more low-key developer named Lake Here Studio, and they were intent to not only switch the genre of the game, but to fuse two genres together, making it not only a strategy RPG, but also a roguelite game. Don't know what a roguelite game is? See Hades. It's the biggest example these days. Suffice it to say, I felt that they were making pretty interesting choices with this game, so I was keeping my eye on it, but as any game under .emu's umbrella is wont to do, they kept pretty quiet about it until they just came out of nowhere one day and announced the release date, and surprise, it was coming out within a week of that announcement. Gotta say, I love how they keep me on my toes. I definitely don't have other shit to do, right? But shout out to .emu all the same, because they gave me a Steam code for the game in collaboration with a site called Daredrop, where you sign up to do streaming challenges in order to keep chat invested in the game you're playing. And even past that, I've already beaten this game like 10 times, so I feel like doing a more formal review for it now that I've gotten so much time in. So today, I'm gonna break down Metal Slug Tactics on Steam.
Hey, yo, Giant, let's go!
Things are pretty straightforward in this game. Series regular antagonist General Morden, who looks like if Che Guevara was really into a World War II sort of fashion sense, if you catch my drift, is up to his usual shenanigans with the rebel army, and it's up to the normal army and the Peregrine Falcons, starting with Marco, Theo, and Eri, to stop him. So they hop in the buggy and get right to business, moving through the four main areas of the game, fighting all kinds of familiar enemies, which are soldiers, some of them on that Arabian Nights type beat, mummies, mummy dogs, and mutants? What the fuck? As you go through each area, you will take on missions in a somewhat randomized order, with each one offering different rewards, as well as a secondary prize for completing side objectives. The main objective can be everything from kill all enemies to kill specific targets, survive a number of turns, escort a character across the stage, destroy a supply convoy, etc., etc. While the secondary objectives can be things like complete the mission in a certain number of turns, to contribute to X number of kills with a certain character, never have any of your team die, the list goes on. After 3 missions, the boss of the area will show up, and then it's an all-out test at that point. The bosses are these huge mechs that make attacks that are both targeted and widespread, often reshaping the battlefield as battles progress, testing your accrued knowledge of the game's systems and skill up to that point. Those systems include the movement because of the adrenaline system. See, normally in a strategy RPG like this, the strategy would be to place yourself in an advantageous position, hopefully to maximize a unit's combat potential, and usually in the vein of fortifying occupying a position to ensure success. But Metal Slug Tactics isn't concerned with doing things in an old school way, and instead does it in a way that preserves the run and gun spirit of the series proper. Whenever you prep actions with a character and look at their movement grid, pay attention to the colors of the grid squares. The further away you can move, the darker green the tiles become, and moving to those spaces can result in a higher gain of adrenaline. You can even gain more adrenaline from moving between elevations and across gaps. That adrenaline can be spent on a unit's skills, or saved up because high adrenaline gain can add to a separate dodge meter that will allow you to protect yourself against a certain amount of incoming damage. And it also adds to these blue cover squares, which give you a lot more generalized protection against damage. I love this system. It encourages you not only to be smart about movement, but also encouraging moving as much as possible, while still leaving room for consideration of your positioning, not just because of the obvious detriments that come with leaving yourself open, but because of synchronization attacks. When another unit has an enemy you're targeting in its sightline, attacking will lead to your teammates following up with additional attacks. They can do it multiple times a turn too, so if it can be accounted for, syncs lead to incredibly efficient screen clearing, which can be pivotal in any mission, including these epic boss missions. Although you can only activate one sync per turn on a boss, but that's still okay because every participating character can still attack independently of the sync, maximizing damage potential in this instance. Using all of the tools at your disposal, you make your way through the 4 main areas of the game: a desert, some tombs within that desert, a jungle, and eventually Sirocco City, where Mordin is holed up. And with enough grit, brain power, and maybe 1 or 2 of the eponymous Metal Slug tanks for effect, you make your way through the rebel army and Mordin himself. But not for lack of him absolutely refusing to give in the first time, activating a second phase, essentially a second boss stage in rapid succession. Fail along the way, and in true roguelike fashion, you have to start from scratch at the beginning, but succeed and take Mordin down, although he will escape, mocking you for thinking that it was going to be as simple as a single 3-hour run. This is where, once again, because it's a roguelike, the real fun begins. Upon first clearing of the game, you will unlock a brand new character, which for me was Tarma, because his unlock requirement was to unlock every area in the game. From here, you see the game really open up to you, because upon further inspection, the game has a total of 9 characters, each with different requirements, such as clearing the game with a certain number of characters, whereas other characters ask you to essentially do harder runs of the game. There's this one character, Trevor, who asks you to beat the game only clearing 2 areas. That becomes possible in repeat runs once all the areas are unlocked, and clearing 2 areas means only clearing the first area you pick and then running straight to Sirocco City to challenge Mordin again. You know how in Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom there's that whole thing where you can run straight to the final boss after the tutorial if you choose? Yeah, this is basically that. That also makes it hard because all of your gear upgrades and abilities are randomized in every playthrough, so on top of the relying on RNG for a good build per character, you're severely limiting yourself in terms of upgrades for skills. Still, I managed to do it. I also managed to unlock every other character along the way, including my KOF crush Leona, who is only unlocked by beating the game with everyone else. And they have Clark and Ralph, so I have to ask, where my Team Akari peeps at? Regardless of who and how you play though, I think all of the characters are so good. Marco's a balanced character whose skills serve to support all units in multiple ways. Fio is basically the white mage of the group, being able to buff and occasionally heal everyone, and she even gets a skill that protects someone fully from their next received hit, which saved me on so many occasions. Ari is the bomb specialist who can attack at great range and use explosions to cover an equal amount of ground, making her insanely mobile on top of being able to move extra spaces after kills because of her passives. Tarma's also able to cover a lot of ground while also drawing attention to himself. Trevor pulls a bunch of cyber ninja moves that allow him to attack multiple units at range, despite the fact that he's actually a close range type of attacker, while also being able to gain free extra moves mid-turn. Nadia is a machinist and a trapper who lays mines and summons drones for support. Ralph is a close range attacker with skills that allow him to close the distance between himself and others, while Clark is pretty much the polar opposite, covering great range while utilizing skills that can reposition enemies wherever he wants, making him ideal for setting up as many syncs as possible. And lastly, Leona can summon after images, whether by direct use of her skills or in place of killed enemies as a passive, which can be used in a myriad of ways because they actually have the ability to do sync attacks, even at a diagonal range, or being able to use them to reposition units or even explode for additional damage. There's no real right answer in terms of team makeup, but with the character's inherent skills, on top of the fact that you can unlock 4 loadouts per character to switch up their inherent gameplay style, with currency won during runs, as well as more skills and weapon mods that can be potentially found during those runs, you have so many options. It all continues to expand when you start to unlock additional difficulties upon clearing the game. Subsequent playthroughs unlocking more conditional missions between areas that lead to secret bosses that have to be beat before you actually fight that area's boss, or you can ignore those and proceed down a normal path. Whatever leads to you getting more currency for upgrades and such at bases between areas. You can even buy strategic assets, which are one-off supports that you might usually get as mission rewards, which range from standard heals all the way to a free metal slug or a slugnoid mech. mech to use during missions. Whatever fits the bill. The level of depth and replayability in this arcadey setup is so fun to constantly revisit and experiment with. All the while, I love looking at this game. The pixel art is gorgeous and there's pretty much no single point where everything on screen is still. The environments and everything within are so detailed it's kinda crazy because every time I look at it I just keep noticing things. Even in the character select screen, the way everyone is so engaged in various activities that give off just that little bit of personality in everything they do. Like, I instantly approve of how while everyone's working out and stuff like that, Ralph is just in the corner playing video games. That's my ideal right there. Forget whatever those alpha male weirdos online are talking about. If you can look like this while playing video games, peak performance. And when I got to the final stage and I see Morden calling the Falcons a bunch of slack-jawed idiots, I was like, hey, don't be like that. Marco looks like he's having a great time out here. More than just there and in mission, but also at the rest stops between worlds, it is just impressive how many moving pieces there are here. Like, who thought to animate this monkey just chilling and eating bananas while everything else is going on? Pay that person more. This game just embodies the term motion. Whether you're just watching or moving or attacking or watching enemies and bosses do all that stuff, I seriously commend the art and animation teams on this. Granted, I did run into the occasional bug here and there on my Steam copy where sometimes buttons and command prompts just straight up disappeared from the screen and therefore wouldn't register my ability to use them when I pressed the buttons. It didn't happen all the time, but it was really frustrating when I had multiple reinforcements, this game's version of revives, because permadeath isn't a thing in this game, and I couldn't use them to res my units. There was also a bug I ran into specifically on the Spider Tank boss of World 3 a number of times where upon ending the turn prior to my winning turn, the game just locked and never starts the enemy turn. Therefore, I believe it was a smart move to make the game autosave after every single move, because if this had cost me a run when I was already 2 hours in, I would have been pissed. Even though it's still annoying that it only fixes itself by restarting the game, I can honestly live with it thanks to that. I also find it funny how sometimes when you eject someone from a Metal Slug, their arms are just gone. Where did they go? Did Marco forget them in the tank? That's kind of hilarious. Then there's this one in the tombs where characters can be mummified in the second world, but when they die, a visual bug happens where they turn back to normal and they just stand there as if the game wasn't very clear on the fact that they just very much fucking died.
Just a flesh wound.
In a weird way, there's this almost, how do I put it? It almost feels like slapstick to me. So it's hard to be mad at anything that's happening when I can get a chuckle out of it and then the game doesn't break to the point of no return. Plus the music sells it all. T. Lopes once again not missing for the life of him. The theme song is epic and sets the mood with upbeat tunes at the start of the run where you're picking characters, and then it transitions into more standard militaristic beats before getting into missions, where the world themes usually find a healthy balance between the two vibes. I swear, they only get better as the game progresses too. But one of my favorite moments is when the boss appears to the sound of a red alert popping off before serving a vibe to prep you for the battle to come. There are even these moments where when meeting certain conditions, you get scenes where the characters have interactions to foster the feeling that this is a unit that's really familial with each other in a way. Meanwhile, the track that plays is so Saturday morning cartoon coded. I actually appreciate them having this because it gives you a sense of all these characters and a little bit of lore for everybody in case you weren't familiar with the series like me. Much appreciated. It definitely needs to iron out some of those technical problems, but by and large, I love pretty much everything about Metal Slug Tactics. The genre change was handled masterfully, if I do say so myself. And if I had this much fun playing the game for over 10 runs, maybe I should go back and play some Metal Slug games. That'd be nice. As it is, MST is an accomplishment on every front, and Lake Gear Studio delivered a hit in my eyes. So thank you to .emu and Daredrop for the code to the game. I really appreciate it because I had so much fun getting to experience this game. Just a great time all around. And thank all of you for taking the time to watch this video. But now I'll ask you, what are your thoughts on Metal Slug Tactics? Make sure to leave a comment because I actually do read and respond to all of them when I have time. And if you like the video, then be sure to, well, like the video and also maybe subscribe along the way so you can be around for what comes next. I would love that. In the meantime, you can watch me on Twitch where I actually played this game live and you can chat it up with me while I play games that may or may not be covered on this channel. I also want to take the time to shout out my patrons. Thank you all for your support. And if you want to be someone who supports the works that I produce on this channel, be sure to check out the One Sleepy Giant Patreon where all are welcome in the Sleepy City crew. With all that said, we're officially at the end of today's video, so thank you for watching. My name is Hector and I'm One Sleepy Giant. I had a blast today, but I need to get some rest because next time you see me, we're going on a quest. Take care, everybody.